M. The Media Project. Imagine a vibrant region that embraces innovative technology and systems, allowing individuals and businesses to grow and thrive within the natural and cultural lifestyle of Vermont. Imagine the Black River Innovation Campus. Our community includes business and technology programming, co-working and technology tools, and other exciting experiences that are quickly creating an outsized impact to our little corner of northern New England here in Springfield, Vermont. PC Mag rates Springfield, Vermont number 8 for the best work-from-home cities in the U.S. Join us in Vermont. Begin your journey at bricvt.org.
Hey, it's a sunny afternoon here in beautiful Rutland, Vermont, USA. And on the other end of the line, as they say, is my good friend Ed Bove. He's the executive director of our own Rutland Redevelopment Authority here in Rutland. Ed, it's a pleasure having you on the show today.
Great. Thanks, Scott. Appreciate being here. Look forward to it.
As you know, a big part of this show is about urbanism, rural development, about incremental development, all kinds of strong themes around neighborhood building. And you recently came to lead the RRA. Can you tell my listeners, because they're all over the market, they're not just here in Vermont, a little bit about the RRA, what the Redevelopment Authority's function is, how long it's been around, and then under your new leadership, where do you see the direction of the organization going?
Yeah, sure. The the organization, what we're really trying to do is redevelop or develop in Rutland City, and what that development looks like takes different shapes and forms. It's smaller one-off housing units to putting together larger projects in downtown. So really anything that contributes to land use and development, community development, funding, incentives for businesses that are already here. That's kind of what the RRA does. It was originally created in the late 80s and early 90s as kind of to be the economic development wing of the city of Rutland. And that was done to separate an organization from any political influences, mayor turnover, that sort of thing, kind of to have its own entity that would lead development and economic development in the city. And that's where it started. We're in charter for the city to do that. We operate contracts with the city as if we're consultants to the city of Rutland, although we are in City Hall and we work with all city departments really closely. So it's kind of this interesting relationship of what the RRA is its own kind of unit of government. We, in addition to development and projects, we also lead grant writing for the city and grant administration. So the city receiving funding that usually runs through the RRA, which is great because it lets us keep in close contact with all the other city departments like DPW and planning and zoning work well with. So we do a little bit of that. And like I say, development, helping developers a lot, leading housing groups, starting in on some tax increment finance creation for the city to entice more development, more developers, is trying to attract more bodies to the city.
Add and increase the footprint of relatively new infrastructure on the streets. like we've seen on Center Street and Merchants Row and all that, because that's fairly recent too, before my time living
Yeah.
here. But the cities, that part of the footprint is really well outfitted, and so this is the TIF is about extending that. I would imagine.
Yeah, it's about helping with infrastructure, either that's like water, sewer, but also brownfields cleanup counts.
Yeah, right.
To help with those costs that are, but for that development would not occur. So we try to get rid of the but for. That's the point of the TIF.
Yeah.
And how that can help some of the projects we're hoping to get going.
Cool. Our mayor placed recently a goal before us of 1,000 units of housing in 5 years. Like the rest of the state, really like the rest of the country, we have our own local version of the housing crisis, or the housing challenge, as the Strong Towns folks like to call it. And, so 1,000 units in 5 years. If you know anything about Vermont, that's a lofty goal. And, where, from your perspective, as the fearless leader of the RRA, what are some of the best ways we can get there? What are the things we need to do to both challenge and incentivize the private sector? Because I hear that number and I'm all for it. I love this. I love big goals and big numbers. And so, how do we get there? Is it what's the basic premise of the plan, and also, what are the things we need to do to get all hands on deck, public and private?
Yeah, it's like the how do you eat an elephant kind of thing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But it's that at the same time that you hopefully try to like drink from a hose that's spraying in your face. I think it's a little bit of everything, right?
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that. You and I are both devotees, I think it's fair to say, of among other organizations, Strong Towns, right?
Yeah.
Big on incremental development, big on the bottom up approach, right? And we're going to get to specifically what you think about some of those things in a moment. But you've got this school of thought around incrementalism, which I fully support the merits of that. At the same time, you've got a lot of housing that needs to be brought online, right? And we know that it would benefit small downtown businesses to have more people living in the city center, period, in any city of any size. So
right.
It's
That's
how do we
goal.
get there at a scale, that makes a meaningful amount of sense to those people, among others, but at the same time speaks to, hey, we got a lot of emerging developers that need a chance, and Vermont doesn't have a lot of big developers. So how do we get there?
Well, the incremental growth is probably different for Rutland, Vermont than it is for Manhattan, right? There, an incremental project is probably 50 units to 100 is a tiny project. Where here, it's overwhelmingly big, probably in some places. So the relative of that incrementalism is, how that works is interesting. So in the Rutland scale, because I am a huge believer in incremental development, and in our downtown, with just the size of it is, we're talking developments that we're starting to see come through right now, which are 5 to 10 units as kind of our smaller ones. Again, we do focus on a unit here and there because the thought is, with incrementalism, you have to start somewhere. And, we at least at the RRA, it's funny that we're working on two sized projects, like two tiers of sizes. One are these smaller 5 to 10 unit second floor redevelopment projects, and then at the same time trying for a bigger hotel, bigger housing unit type projects that could go along with the TIF district. So it's both happening together. Whether that gets to 1,000 or not, or how it gets to it, it could be closer than you probably think with such a large number to start with. There have been some projects in the pipeline, but if we add them up together and a couple come in, we're going to take a chunk out of it that, whether it's 1,000 or not, it still feels like a lot. There's still more bodies downtown. There's still all those businesses benefiting from those bodies downtown. Restaurants are popping up, some of the eco development. which will eventually get us over that goal. But it's got to start. It's got to start again somewhere. And in the last couple of years, since COVID, it really has. It's kind of changed the look of Rutland in a way where there's a lot more on the ground single family residential investment. Some might call that gentrification, but that's happening where it wasn't before. So the next level up development in that incremental growth model is kind of what we're seeing right now, and more of a focus to some of the space we do have downtown, some of those first ring suburbs that are starting to densify a little bit.
Right.
Some of the new housing legislation that came through last year with Act 181, where you're forced to have a certain number of units. Rutland, it's funny, our zoning ordinance actually accommodated most of the changes that are required of many other ordinances throughout the state of Vermont.
Yeah, so it's not the ordinances that are the challenge. It's the interest in development. It's the finances, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, yes, right. It's getting enough rent, right? You know, will they pencil out, which is where some of the TIF district stuff comes in, and some of the incentives on the water and sewer end we've been doing have all come in to bridge that gap from where the market is and where it needs to be to make these happen. So,
the end goal is that more inventory comes online, ideally, and that it drives down prices overall, so it makes it more affordable to build and to maintain. However, the inevitable happens, and we're doing that in a system that's been designed to create scarcity so that it drives values up due to scarcity, right? Bad if you're looking for a place to live. Good if you're already the owner of something that already exists, right? But it's really part of the challenge of getting stuff built in the first place. There are no good answers to this, but this is something that both of us, each in our respective wheelhouses, deal with every day in trying to do what's best in our leadership roles, right? I mean, do you have any good answers to that or any indicators? It's remarkable, right? In Austin, all the development of the last 18 months earlier this spring led to a 7% decrease in overall rents in the city.
Yeah.
This was a good thing. Plus, it brought more than 1,000 units of housing online. However, two of the largest developers went out of business. So it indicates what their margins were in the first place. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah. Wow, like at a 7% decrease, what would happen if that was like 10%? I mean, you must be giving some thought to all of that. And I'm just interested to know what's going on in your mind,
Yeah, it's an interesting thought, especially in a community like Rutland. There's only 16,000 people. And then in that urban core, which you have there. So the margins here, I mean, haven't even been in the position where they were in Austin to get someone to even try that.
100%. Yeah.
But, I've heard a lot about that, and just the scale of development, it's a little different than what we're seeing here. So here, if we're talking 5 or 6 projects and how those affect the built environment, and they infect the land use and just the Vermont brand itself, nothing is risk-free, obviously. At the end of the day, though, if we get 500 housing units created in the downtown, I don't think that with the size of our developers that are actually going to be doing this, they're going to be going out of business. I think, when you're creating at such a mass scale, perhaps that might be something that we don't see here, where everything is so custom, so design reviewed.
The Vermont Technology Alliance. The VTTA is the only statewide organization focused on Vermont's tech business sector and entrepreneurs. Our business members are Fortune 500 companies, startup founders, small business owners, and soloists. We provide advocacy, recruiting of tech talent, events, and other networking opportunities. We are the heart of the tech ecosystem in Vermont. Become a member now at vtta.org. The Vermont Technology Alliance. Tech thrives here.
So is that your way of getting to the idea that small and nimble will actually pan out better here than somebody coming in and, saying, yeah, I'll build 1,000 units for you?
Well, I don't know, because a lot of this is going into a downtown where it used to be housing. So that, those were at one time in the 1880s developed as housing units that have been vacant for over 50 years. So in a sense, I don't know if we're probably not seeing that vacancy in Austin, but we're actually have the built environment to lead that into. So I don't know if, coming back again to that, because if you have vacant units, talking about the market and factoring in sprawl and, where people are living in Rutland town, in the growth there.
I mean, let me stop you there. Is that a function of tax incentives, right? In other words, if I'm underutilizing a property, is the tax incentive, should one exist, is greater than the risk of my investing money in it so that I can get it? Because the cost per square foot, we're in a part of New England where the rents aren't the highest they are in New England, but the cost to redevelop, especially infill development, is every bit as high as it would be in the Boston market, just about. And we have a lack of labor to do the work too. That's the other challenge that I think is, personally, I've found particularly acute in northern New England, is sometimes we just don't have anybody, to fill out a crew and get something done in a reasonable amount of time. You got these three things that are like doing this, right? That are just, that are fighting against each other. And so you make what I would perceive to be a fairly rational decision. Like, as much as I know this housing is needed, it's just right now, it's not the right time for me to bring it back online.
Yeah, well, like you say, that's where we're trying to, get more money into the pot so it does lessen that risk and get people to take the leap of faith. The workforce part of that question, that's what's always going to keep probably the developers small around here and keep that scale small. But the one advantage we do have is there isn't a lot of land.
Right.
So it's not some of those places further west that can expand and, I guess that illusion of growth, right? If we're talking about strong towns, right? The illusion of growth, totally. Right?
Yeah.
Going around to the edge. But
we can't build suburbia if we tried.
Right. So
except for in the Champlain Plain, because, where it flattens out, that's the only flat land in virtually this entire state.
Yes. And now with some of the land use regs, and it's harder, and it's more than land use regs, just appeals.
Yeah.
The threat of an appeal for any large scale development, that we've kind of restricted ourselves, which is maybe not a bad thing, to the urban cores, which is why, we have a downtown designation, an NDA, right. Those sort of things, which add additional incentives. So we've just incentivized these village centers and downtowns so much, and they're still, putting all their efforts into that on top of a lot of community support.
Yes.
I think that's what might be in our favor, where you might not see that in the similarly sized town anywhere else in the country, like in Ohio, any place else that isn't Vermont.
And it helps us maximize our green space, which is a big reason why people live here. It's a big reason why people visit here. And it's just better for our water, our air, et cetera. Why not take advantage of what's already there, add to it, but to keep that density, like you said, to build in dense, centralized areas, which is less expensive for people economically to live long term too. It's walkable, bikeable, your amenities are close by. It's why mixed use development works in most cases.
Yeah, and the city of Rutland, the taxes they're not cheap. So maximizing the infrastructure when we totally can and have capacity, and building off, like you say, a Pine Hill Park and the rec economy in Killington.
Yeah.
I mean, those are natural assets that we're so fortunate to have.
Right.
So that's the draw. I mean, that's the selling point,
So you mentioned, the organization getting involved in easing those financial stacks, right? Besides the TIF district, which is underway, what other ways using state or federal dollars can you target parts of private developers, financial stack to incentivize?
So on the local level, like you say, there could be some TIF when the district gets set up. That's what we're working on now. It's not set up yet. But they're simple things, like almost like low-hanging fruit kind of things, like taking our water and sewer fees and just for a couple years lowering those dramatically. Like right there saves so much upfront. When the developments are just trying to get off the ground, relieving that huge cost has been helpful. We've already seen it kick in possibly some developments that might not have happened, but give it enough to be like, okay, I'm going to take the next step kind of thing. So we've got some access to low interest capital through some of the revolving loan programs. There's some other housing grants available right now, just at the local level, a lot through some of the money that the states put towards housing. Moving up next level incentives, one that we're really getting excited about is we're going to be applying for a Act 250 Tier 1A exemption, which basically is going to take parts of the city, a lot of the densely populated areas, and get that exempt from commercial and residential development, which is huge because that's another huge cost. So you layer that on top of some of the local incentives. If the TIF district is able to provide brownfields and public infrastructure, if you start layering all these things up together, and then some of the new tax exemptions from the state of Vermont for housing, we're hoping those are enough to get it going. Because if that's not going to get it going with all of that level, which I can't remember a time when there's been so much directed to trying to get new development, I don't know what, is going to do it.
The Act 250 exemption seems pretty existential to me for two reasons. One, it lifts limitations on number of units and what have you. But then you've also got, where people get stuck with Act 250 often is that, not just abutters, but, citizens in general can appeal. And those appeals usually end up in adding both time, which is money for developers, and cost, right? Like, let's restudy this. Let's add engineering and, again, small emerging developers, especially, or owner occupied, just small level people in a local area trying to build a little bit of housing. That's the difference often between, $250,000, sometimes less than that, is the difference between, having the lending and being able to do a project and not. And to find that out 2/3 of the way or a third of the way through a project, besides being heartbreaking, it's just contributing to how the hell are we going to get to 1,000 units of housing in 5 years, Yeah.
Act 81 did help a little on the appeal end. Basically you need more people to file an appeal, but it's a drop in the bucket. So that's the goal of, a lot of appeals they don't think they're going to win. They just want to tie it up long enough to, have the developer just not bother. So that's still a thing, obviously. But again, these are, just removing that barrier is going to be huge. And then, getting to that number of units. If we start seeing some projects that in the old days would have triggered Act 250 that now aren't, and they're adding 50 to 100 units in the right areas where it wouldn't feel like overwhelming the Rutland scale, then, we're going to get close to that number, surprisingly close.
Yeah.
So that's exciting.
So changing gears a bit, for a brief period of time, you grew up here in Rutland, Vermont. You went to Arizona. First, tell our listeners where, and then, maybe talk a bit about that the profile of that place and some of the challenges or positives that were occurring in the housing market or economic development there in general, and how it compares to here.
Yeah, yeah, it's just a total different world, like the West versus the East, right?
Maybe, maybe not, right? I mean, humans are humans.
Mindsets and attitude and everything. It was funny, you know, when I went to the University of Arizona, and when I got there in 1994, it was a totally different town than it was when I left in 2005. And it just went through this, well, for a long time, it was a sleepy, you know, it was still a big sized town, but it was different. It was a grid that was just laid out so quickly that it seemed to go on forever. But there was a little tiny railroad core in Tucson, and then it turned into your typical mile stretch grids like anywhere in the West. But then towards the end of it, that started to fill in. And some of the newer concepts of transit-oriented development and creating centers and creating senses of place and getting more investment back into the old Tucson downtown, which was a really cool place. Having enough time pass from urban renewal times, which really devastated part of the downtown in Tucson. So the new planning concepts that were coming around again, the old being new, and some more form considerations in zoning rather than just use, and rather than just separating uses, where the leaders out there, as you know, they are here, realize that, you know, separating uses isn't really how cities grow naturally and organically, and
makes you rely on the car. Yeah.
And makes you rely on the car. Right. And so, you know, Rutland always felt like a very organically grown city. Because we have a grid too, which is a great thing, but it's not a Western grid type of thing. You know, it's not a grid with huge blocks and gigantic intersections. So we've always had that kind of natural growth here. And except for in like a couple areas of Rutland, we don't see a lot of that type of development. So Arizona and Tucson and Phoenix and all those places were just different worlds, but interesting as well for their newness, for their shiny kind of feeling, I suppose. And before I became an urban planning student or an architecture student, those things were cool. Being out there, and it's like, wow, you know, this is great, and the roads are smooth, and you know, it's awesome. But then after a while, you kind of understand how it functions, and you want to be in some of the places out there that don't exist anymore. So that was always the difference between there and Rutland. But since they've, you know, in the last, you know, even after I left, like 10 years after, they've still been booming. But it's mostly infill. It's mostly creating senses of place. It's mostly in the downtown area. It's still, they still have land on the outside, and it goes that direction too, because a lot of the home builders, that's what they know how to build.
Right.
So that's there, but it's kind of coinciding with a growth in the center as well, with some rail, like light rail, and more housing downtown. So a lot of the same things we're trying to emulate here in Rutland, we saw them do out there in like a Western city kind of thing. The Western at the time, very conservative city, which is changing now, but it wasn't, you know, this was still a time in Arizona with cars and roads and oil and
sprawl,
all that sort of thing. Sprawl, the sprawl machine, right?
Yeah.
So if it can happen there, it can happen here.
Yeah, you paint a vivid picture and gives us this really great snapshot of the, you know, in the, I think it's more telling for the similarities than the differences, right?
Yeah.
As much as there's like that local difference, some of the form and function is the same that got us to where we are, but now, you know, it's a gradual shift into rethinking, an updated return, as it were, you know?
Yeah, right. Like the, you know, when we talk in Rutland about the, you know, the lane reconfigurations.
Yeah, to make things more bikeable ultimately, right? Is for one.
And that's funny that like in a Western city, a conservative Western city back in the day, 15 years ago, they were having that discussion and those arguments. So Rutland's, we're getting there. We're getting closer. So.
Nice. Well, as you know, I'm spearheading a national housing initiative for our region called Breaking Housing Matters in different parts of New England, including Vermont. And generally, I sense your general attitude towards things like Breaking Housing Matters is, that people should be innovating in various ways on how they're going to fund housing. How we in various ways solve the housing crisis, right, over the long haul. And I wonder if you have anything to comment about that. At all, about innovation of various kinds in how we finance and then how we build housing, really innovation across the spectrum of the built environment.
Well, innovation is needed because it's not happening right now. At least I'm not seeing it on the ground. I see it a little bit and it's starting to happen, but we have to keep innovating or we're not going to get to that goal of 1,000 units. So whatever that looks like, I want to see development in the right areas that contribute to the sense of place and that ultimately reuse infrastructure, which helps the city budgets and lowers taxes. So if innovation can lead us to a place where all those things are happening and we have more bodies downtown and more restaurants and more housing and we're reusing infrastructure again to keep costs low for the city and we're creating resilient development, I am 100% for it. So I know it looks different in different places and for different things. So like I said, if I'm seeing that going towards achieve our units and it can happen, we'll find a way to have that create to the sense of place that we need created to get Rutland back to where it was at one point and get back there again, because there's no reason why we can't be. We've got so much happening and so much to do and great people and a great spot. Like we're just blessed with where we are on so many areas. So there's no reason we can't see that innovation and we can't see that development where we want it.
Yeah, here. And what about the initiative, the BHM initiative, do you think might work here in our market? Regardless of how you define the market, Rutland, the region itself, the state, Northern New England.
Well, I think the BHM part that's interesting is somehow the creation of a fund, of some kind of funding mechanism that people that's not government sourced, I suppose. Like that's not publicly funded. It's a private fund of some kind that people can tap into to help them bridge that gap to develop. So that's the part I feel would be really interesting. And it's something that our housing group talks about a lot. It's something that we hear some of the financial institutions saying they would like to get involved with something like that. So how do we actually create that? What does that look like? So, I mean, I think that was the part of BHM that was really fascinating because it seems like something that's in demand. You hear a lot about that, like some private fund that a developer can use to replace one of the other funding sources that, might be killing them somehow.
Yeah, it's funny you went there. That was how I initially got involved, was the interest in like, how do I as an emerging developer, what kind of financial mechanisms can I take part in or even create that will further incentivize development, put me in a better financial position, and that way I'm not 100% relying. The more parts, sources for your financial stack that you can find that are good and reliable and that survive any singular political administration or any singular time period. Diversifying on your financial stack and having enough cash flow throughout the life of a project, those are not bad things. They're quite essential,
Yeah, and there is a benefit to not having, like you say, tied to a political administration.
Yeah.
I mean, that was That's the whole private part of it. That's really interesting.
Yeah. Here. Ed Bove is the executive director of the Rutland Redevelopment Authority. Anytime you want to come back and talk development is A-okay with us here at the show.
I'd love to. Thank you for having me.
SMG's Are We Here Yet podcast is a production of M the Media Project and SM Graves Associates. Learn more at smgravesassociates.com. In the Jazz Room, we met with orchestra leader-composer Maria Schneider at the Newport Jazz Festival. The show's a bit different. As per Maria's request, she asked that we play 30 seconds of music and one full composition from her project, Data Lords. As you listen to this interview, she talks not only about creating her music, but defending the copyrights of her music in the world of free music streaming and music distributors charging artists exorbitant fees for their use digitally. If you'd like to know more about Maria, check out www.mariaschneider.com. And now, enjoy the show.
This is Maria Schneider, inviting you to join me in the Jazz Room with host Joan Watson-Jones.
Our guest is composer, band leader, multiple Grammy winner, Maria Schneider. We met at the Newport Jazz Festival and will talk about her work and her CD, dual CD, Data Lords. At Maria's request, we will play excerpts from Data Lords and one full piece, which you'll hear at the end of this program. You just heard a little bit of Don't Be Evil, and now A World Lost.
Welcome to the Jazz Room, Maria Schneider. Welcome.
Thank you.
Oh, we're here with all the background of the Newport Jazz Festival.
Yes, it's exciting.
It is exciting. Now, is this your second time here?
Oh, no, I've been here a few times, but I can't tell you how many because I can't remember.
That's okay. That's okay. Because I remember seeing you here quite a few years ago.
Yeah, I've been here a few times.
Yes, I remember that. Now, I did a lot of looking into your CD, The Data Lords. And
yeah, it's a double CD that looks at the two aspects of life. One where we're inundated by big data companies that are pushing for our attention and really trying to make young people and everybody addicted so that they can gather data from us. And then the second CD is when you pull away from that world and you insist on the kind of sovereignty of your own space and silence, the kinds of things you encounter through nature, art, and relationships, real human relationships.
Yeah, we are all searching for those.
Yeah, and now more than ever. I mean, it used to be that was the natural thing. Mm-hmm. When we had space in our lives, we looked to each other and connections, and now everybody kind of goes into this internal sort of fake world of the internet, and they get lost, and everybody's depressed and lonely and wonders why. But I think that's largely why.
talk a little bit about your collaboration with David Bowie.
Oh, yeah.
That fascinated me, so I wanted to hear about that.
Well, David came to hear my band quite a lot of years ago. I can't even remember when exactly. It was the Jazz Standard. And I didn't meet him that night, but everybody told me he was there. And then his assistant reached out to me and wanted to buy all my CDs as a gift for him. So I thought, oh my gosh, I guess he liked it. And then out of the blue, he reached out to me wanting to collaborate on a song. And it was a fantastic experience because we loved working together. We were good collaborators. You know, he came to my apartment, we sat at the piano and just started working on a song that he had the beginnings of. And he wanted me to kind of develop it with him and take it to sort of a very dark place. That was something he wanted, is dark. And he wanted it to feature my band, which was kind of crazy, you know, rock meets big band. I was just like I was so worried about making something horrible. And he said something to me that was really great because I was full of worry. And he said, Maria, the great thing about music is if the plane goes down, we all walk away. and that has become a really good lesson for me, that, you know, it's like, well, we take this so serious. We live and hang on every note, and oh God, it's got to be good, and we put all this pressure on ourselves. But in the end, you know, it is true. It's not like true. It's not like designing a plane, and if, you know, it goes down, you kill lots of people. No, this is
we all walk away.
The best is, the worst is people say, don't like it so much. It's like, okay.
Let's jump in. I just have to jump right in because I know you're an advocate, the copyright issue.
Yes.
Let's talk about that because that's something that I have issues with myself. And I see what's going on, but I want people to be educated about what happens to musicians and artists and their intellectual material.
Well, the thing that's happened originally to us has now pretty much happened to everybody. But we were kind of the canaries in the coal mine where our music was used as bait, like chum, you know, when they cut up a fish to catch bigger fish. They used our music to attract eyeballs to their websites, you know. So these big companies, they needed the infringement because the infringement is what created the feeding frenzy of people coming for all this free music, and then they would gather everybody's data, and so we were used. And they tried to talk musicians into. They tried to change the look of things, saying to musicians, well, this is going to grow your audience. Look at all the people that are seeing your music that never saw it before or heard your music. But the thing is that we started dying of overexposure. And if your music's made available for free, you can't compete against that when it comes time to sell your music.
That's right.
And as you know, most of us are paying for our own records. We need to make the money back.
We do need to make the money back.
People spend tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, on records, and you know, and then everybody's supposed to get it for free. And now it's not just, you know, movies and music, but people don't realize how everything about their lives is being used. Their information, you know, I mean, even people that, you know, say, oh, I want to do 23andMe. Do they really know what's going to happen when a company has their genetic information? And what is that going to mean downstream? I mean, so this thing, it's hitting every aspect of our society, and people need to really wake up. Really, really wake up. I've been screaming about this for years, you know.
So tell me a little bit about a couple of the tunes on because we're only going to play snippets from your CD.
Well, today we're going to play on the Newport concert. We're going to play two pieces from the Data Lords CD. One is Data Lords, the title piece, which is about the inundation of information and the gathering of data, and then turning that into artificial intelligence, which some people say is going to mean utopia for humankind, but some people say the opposite could happen, that artificial intelligence could become so intelligent it would turn on humanity and destroy it. And so that's what about the piece is about, the destruction of humanity at the hands of AI. And then we're playing a piece called Sputnik that is looking at satellites, which now are, corporations have them, thousands of them, and imagining the satellites like an exoskeleton around the Earth of our digital information. But what we're not playing today, but is on the second side of the CD, for instance, is a piece called Stone Song. Features Steve Wilson. It says Sputnik features Scott Robinson. Data Lords featured Mike Rodriguez on trumpet and, Dave Pietro on alto. But for this piece, Stone Song, that Steve plays, it's just imagining a little stone being kicked around and bumped around and waiting eons to show a new side of itself. Have a little rain hit it and its colors change. Yes. And it's and I used what I did was there was a piece of pottery that this famous potter named Jack Troy had made with a little stone inside. And so that's used as a percussion instrument. And so it's Stone Song. And Steve plays really masterfully, as does the whole rhythm section.
I was able to listen to a little bit of the tracks that you sent me. And I listened this morning to The Sun.
Oh, The Sun Waited for Me.
The Sun Waited for Me. And yes, I'm a musician myself and a composer and also a photographer. So when I hear music, I see pictures. Mm-hmm. And I could see the sunset.
Yeah.
I could see the sunrise. It's as I go back to college, music history. I think of some of what you're doing is what they used to call in that particular impressionistic period.
Yeah, kind of tone poems or something like that almost, right?
Breaking Housing Matters is a national housing initiative building housing profitably. It is a first-of-its-kind initiative currently being piloted in Rutland City, Vermont, USA. BHM brings multiple key stakeholders from the housing development ecosystem together to solve the dual issues of affordability and profitability. Participate in an all-ships-rise approach designed by a multiplicity of internationally recognized experts in development, economics, housing, and governance. Donate, start a petition for your community, or learn more at breakinghousingmatters.org. Press and program inquiries, please contact our Vermont Director, Scott Graves, at scott@breakinghousingmatters.org.
I was in love with Debussy when he was that kind of tone visual person, and that's what I hear with you.
I love I think for me music, it isn't so much about making music for music, but it's about that the music sort of draws life experiences out of me, and then I form them into sound to try to carry people into that same experience. So that particular piece was originally written as a vocal to the poetry of Ted Kuzer, and it's a beautiful poem. How important it must be to someone that I am alive and that I've written these poems This morning the sun stood right at the end of the road and waited for me.
Oh,
And
that's
it's
beautiful.
It's the final poem in a book that he wrote after going on 100 morning walks in the winter and writing a poem every day as he recovered from cancer. And that was the final one of, how important it must be to someone that I'm alive and that I've written these poems. This morning the sun stood right at the end of the road and waited for me.
Oh,
it's a beautiful poem.
Here's an excerpt from The Sun Waited for Me, and then Stone Song.
Now, what are you looking forward to? Do you have another project coming in mind?
No.
Or are you dreaming yet?
I know. I'm going to tell you what I'm doing. I'm creating space in my life. I'm doing the opposite. I have been pushing for so long, and I feel dry. And as I said to you, my music, it depends on life experience. And if all I'm doing is producing, and I'm not stopping to just re-experience, discover new things in life that give me joy, that spark my enthusiasm, I've been feeling really burnt and just a little bit dry. So I'm super excited about making some changes in my life that are around putting more space in my life to live, to be even friends, family, traveling, seeing things, not just because I have a gig there, but because I want to feed my soul, and then for sure it'll turn into music because it always does. But that's the foundation for me. It's like I'm from farm country in Minnesota. You can't plow and push a field again and again and keep producing.
No,
you have to
can't.
start putting fake fertilizer on it. It gets tired. The food doesn't taste good anymore. You have to let that field go fallow.
Yes.
Let it sit and regenerate. And that's what I always think about myself. I'm in a period I need to go fallow for a little bit.
I get it. I
Yeah.
get it so much. Well, I wish you the best on
Thank
finding
you.
your space, because it's amazing. As soon as you find that space, the music will find you again.
That's right. And, the hardest thing I think musicians have, anybody, is finding balance in life.
Mm-hmm.
And, we're from a culture that it's all, at least my generation, and, it was always about pushing. But there's something to be said for balance. So
Yes.
I'm trying to find it.
Well, I'm just checking Oh, good. We're beautiful. Well, thank you so much for joining us in
Thank
the Jazz
you.
Room, Maria Schneider.
Thank you. Great to speak with you.
We're going to play for you now the full version of Sputnik. I'll let Maria tell you about this song.
Sputnik, that is looking at satellites, which now are, corporations have them, thousands of them, and imagining the satellites like an exoskeleton around the Earth of our digital information.
Learn more about Maria and her music at her website, mariaschneider.com.
The Jazz Room is distributed by M. The Media Project and S.M. Graves Associates. Learn more at smgravesassociates.com.